It was a cold, rainy evening when Sarah moved into her grandmother's old house in the countryside. The house had been abandoned for years, ever since her grandmother's mysterious disappearance. Among the creaky floors and dusty furniture, one thing stood out: a heavy iron-bound door in the basement. Her grandmother had always forbidden anyone from entering the basement, but curiosity got the better of Sarah. One night, after unpacking, she decided to explore the basement. As she descended the stairs, an icy draft hit her face. The door at the bottom loomed large, its iron surface covered in strange, unreadable symbols. She pushed the door open, revealing a dark, musty room filled with old furniture and forgotten relics. A sense of dread washed over her, but she shrugged it off and continued exploring. Hours passed as she rummaged through the old boxes. Suddenly, she heard a faint whisper. She froze, listening intently. The whisper grew louder, more insistent, but she couldn't make out the words. It seemed to be coming from the darkest corner of the room. With a trembling hand, she picked up a flashlight and shone it towards the sound. In the beam of light, she saw a figure standing in the corner, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Sarah gasped and stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. The figure stepped forward, its face twisted in a grotesque expression of pain and anger. She recognized it immediately. It was her grandmother. "Leave this place," the ghostly figure hissed. "You are not safe here." Sarah wanted to run, but her legs felt like lead. The ghost advanced, its cold presence chilling her to the bone. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her, trapping her in the basement with the vengeful spirit. Desperate, Sarah searched for a way out. She found an old, dusty book on a shelf, its pages filled with strange symbols similar to those on the door. She realized that this book might hold the key to escaping the basement. With trembling fingers, she began to read aloud from the book. As she chanted the strange words, the ghost screamed in agony, its form flickering like a candle in the wind. The basement shook, and the symbols on the door glowed with an eerie light. Sarah continued reading, her voice growing stronger as the ghost's screams grew louder. Finally, with a deafening roar, the ghost vanished, leaving behind a chilling silence. The door creaked open, and Sarah bolted up the stairs, her heart racing. She never looked back as she fled the house, vowing never to return. Years later, the house remains abandoned, a testament to the horrors that lurked within. Some say that on stormy nights, the ghost of Sarah's grandmother can still be heard, whispering in the darkness, waiting for another curious soul to wander into the basement. Sarah tried to move on with her life, but the memories of that night haunted her. She often woke up in the middle of the night, hearing the faint whispers of her grandmother's ghost. She sought the help of a therapist, but nothing seemed to erase the terror she felt. One day, she received a letter from a distant relative who claimed to know the secrets of Elmwood Manor. The letter warned her that the spirit in the basement was far more dangerous than she had imagined, and that it was bound to the house by a dark ritual. Determined to end the haunting once and for all, Sarah returned to Elmwood Manor with the letter in hand. The instructions led her to a hidden compartment in the basement, where she found a collection of ancient cursed objects. Among them was a pendant that matched the symbols on the door. Following the letter's guidance, Sarah performed a ritual to break the curse. As she completed the final incantation, the basement trembled and a blinding light filled the room. The ghost of her grandmother appeared one last time, but this time her face was peaceful. "Thank you," the spirit whispered before fading away. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and Sarah felt a sense of calm for the first time since entering the house. She knew the curse was broken, and the spirit was finally at rest. Sarah left Elmwood Manor, feeling a weight lifted from her shoulders. She hoped that the house would no longer be a place of fear and torment. As she drove away, she glanced back one last time and saw the house standing in the distance, now just an ordinary old home. Tom had always been fascinated by the old Victorian house at the end of Maple Street. It had a reputation for being haunted, but he dismissed the rumors as superstitions. When it went up for sale at a bargain price, he couldn't resist buying it. The house was a fixer-upper, but Tom saw potential in its faded grandeur. The basement door was particularly intriguing. Unlike the rest of the house, it was sturdy and well-preserved, with an elaborate lock that seemed out of place. Tom felt a strange compulsion to open it, but he couldn't find the key. One night, after a few drinks, he decided to break the lock. As soon as the door swung open, a foul stench wafted out. Tom gagged but pushed forward, descending the stairs into the pitch-black basement. He fumbled for the light switch, but it didn't work. Using his phone's flashlight, he explored the space. It was empty, save for a few old trunks and a large, dusty mirror. He was about to leave when he heard a soft, scratching noise. He turned around, but there was nothing there. The scratching grew louder, coming from behind the mirror. Tom approached it cautiously, his breath visible in the suddenly frigid air. He wiped the dust from the mirror and gasped at what he saw. In the reflection, he saw a figure standing behind him, a gaunt, pale woman with hollow eyes. He spun around, but the basement was empty. When he looked back at the mirror, the woman was closer, her mouth open in a silent scream. Terrified, Tom tried to run, but the basement door slammed shut, trapping him inside. The scratching noise intensified, now coming from all around him. He felt a cold hand brush against his neck and spun around, only to see the woman standing inches from him. Her icy breath chilled him to the bone as she whispered, "You should not have opened the door." Tom's phone died, plunging the basement into darkness. He felt something wrap around his ankles, pulling him to the floor. He struggled, but the grip was too strong. The woman's face loomed above him, her empty eyes boring into his soul. She opened her mouth, and a torrent of darkness poured out, engulfing him. When Tom's friends came looking for him, they found the basement door locked and the house eerily quiet. The authorities eventually broke down the door, but the basement was empty. Tom had vanished without a trace, leaving only his phone behind. To this day, the house remains abandoned, a grim reminder of Tom's fate. Locals swear they can hear scratching noises coming from the basement and see glimpses of a gaunt woman in the windows. The door remains locked, but some say it waits for another foolhardy soul to open it. Tom's disappearance became a local legend, and the house was dubbed the Cursed Victorian. Paranormal investigators and thrill seekers visited the site, hoping to uncover the truth behind the haunting. None of them stayed long, frightened off by the eerie atmosphere and strange occurrences. Years later, a team of experienced ghost hunters decided to take on the challenge. They set up cameras and recording devices throughout the house, determined to capture evidence of the paranormal. On their first night, they heard the same scratching noises that Tom had encountered. The lead investigator, Mark, felt a chill as he approached the basement door. His equipment malfunctioned as soon as he touched the handle. Ignoring the warnings from his team, he forced the door open and descended the stairs. The mirror still stood at the far end, covered in dust. Mark saw the reflection of the gaunt woman in the mirror, just as Tom had. She seemed to grow closer with each glance. The team's cameras caught glimpses of shadowy figures moving in the darkness. Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut, trapping Mark inside. His team heard his panicked shouts and tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Inside, Mark was confronted by the ghostly woman, her eyes filled with sorrow and anger. She reached out to him, and he felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Mark managed to capture a few moments of the encounter on his handheld camera before it, too, died. His final recording was a desperate plea for help as the woman drew closer. When his team finally broke down the door, Mark was gone, leaving behind only his camera. The footage they recovered was enough to confirm the house's haunted status, but it also raised more questions. Who was the ghostly woman, and why was she trapped in the mirror? The house was sealed off, and no one dared to enter again. Despite the warnings, some thrill seekers still try to break into the Cursed Victorian. They never last long, driven away by the same chilling whispers and ghostly apparitions. The house stands as a testament to the horrors that lie within, its basement door a gateway to nightmares. Emily had inherited her family's ancestral home, a sprawling mansion that had seen better days. The house was full of secrets, but the most disturbing one was the basement door. It was made of heavy oak, with iron bands and an ancient padlock. Her grandfather had always warned her never to open it, but he never explained why. One night, curiosity got the better of Emily. She found an old key hidden in her grandfather's study and knew it was meant for the basement door. With a mix of excitement and trepidation, she descended the creaky stairs and unlocked the door. It swung open with a groan, revealing a dark, cavernous space. The air inside was thick and cold, sending shivers down her spine. She stepped inside, her flashlight casting long shadows on the walls. The basement was filled with old furniture, covered in dust and cobwebs. As she ventured deeper, she noticed a faint blue glow coming from a corner. Emily followed the light and discovered an old, ornate mirror. The glow seemed to emanate from within the glass. She touched the mirror, and the room instantly grew colder. Her reflection began to change, morphing into a figure she didn't recognize. It was a young woman dressed in old-fashioned clothes, her eyes filled with terror. The woman in the mirror reached out, her hand passing through the glass. Emily stumbled back, but the ghostly figure followed her, emerging from the mirror and standing before her. "Help me," the ghost whispered, her voice echoing in the silent basement. "He is coming." Before Emily could react, the basement door slammed shut. She turned to see a shadowy figure standing in the doorway, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. The ghostly woman screamed and disappeared, leaving Emily alone with the dark entity. The figure advanced, its presence suffocating. Emily backed away, her heart pounding in her chest. She tried to remember any protective charms her grandfather had taught her, but her mind was blank with fear. The entity reached out, its fingers like ice, and touched her forehead. A wave of darkness washed over Emily, and she collapsed to the floor. When she woke up, she was in a different part of the basement. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the walls were covered in strange, glowing symbols. She tried to stand, but her legs were weak. In the distance, she heard a voice chanting in an unknown language. She followed the sound, her steps unsteady. She found herself in a small chamber where an old man stood before an altar, chanting. He looked up, his eyes filled with madness. "You should not have come here," he said, his voice dripping with malice. Emily tried to run, but the old man raised his hand, and she was rooted to the spot. The chanting grew louder, and the symbols on the walls glowed brighter. The air crackled with energy as the old man completed his ritual. A portal opened behind him, and he laughed as shadowy figures began to emerge. Emily knew she had to act fast. She remembered the key in her pocket and held it up. The figures recoiled, and the old man screamed in rage. She threw the key into the portal, and it snapped shut, taking the old man and the shadows with it. The basement fell silent, and the oppressive darkness lifted. She stumbled back to the door, which was now unlocked. She fled the house, never looking back. The mansion was eventually condemned and demolished, but locals still tell stories of the cursed doorway and the dark entity that once haunted it. Some say that on quiet nights, you can still hear the ghostly woman's plea for help, echoing through the ruins. Emily tried to move on with her life, but the memories of that night haunted her. She often woke up in the middle of the night, hearing the faint whispers of the ghostly woman. She sought the help of a therapist, but nothing seemed to erase the terror she felt. One day, she received a letter from a distant relative who claimed to know the secrets of the ancestral home. The letter warned her that the spirit in the basement was far more dangerous than she had imagined, and that it was bound to the house by a dark ritual. Determined to end the haunting once and for all, Emily returned to the ruins of the mansion with the letter in hand. The instructions led her to a hidden compartment in the basement where she found a collection of ancient cursed objects. Among them was a pendant that matched the symbols on the door. Following the letter's guidance, Emily performed a ritual to break the curse. As she completed the final incantation, the ruins trembled and a blinding light filled the area. The ghost of the young woman appeared one last time, but this time her face was peaceful. "Thank you," the spirit whispered before fading away. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and Emily felt a sense of calm for the first time since entering the house. She knew the curse was broken, and the spirit was finally at rest. Emily left the ruins, feeling a weight lifted from her shoulders. She hoped that the land would no longer be a place of fear and torment. As she drove away, she glanced back one last time and saw the ruins standing in the distance, now just an ordinary old site. Years passed, and the land where the mansion once stood was transformed into a park. Families played and picnicked there, unaware of the dark history that had once plagued the area. Emily visited occasionally, finding peace in the knowledge that she had freed the trapped spirits. But on certain quiet nights, when the wind was just right, some visitors claimed to hear a faint whisper, a plea for help carried on the breeze. Emily knew that while the dark entity was gone, the echoes of the past would forever linger, a reminder of the horrors that had once haunted the cursed doorway.